14th chapter of the book of Divrei Hyamim of Chronicles 2 continues with the stories, of course, of the kings from the Davidic dynasty. And today we look at king who we mentioned yesterday in the previous chapter took over, which is Asa. Vayas Asa hatov vayashar b'nei Adonai Elohav. Amazingly, unlike seemingly his father and his grandfather to an extent, who, even though they're in some ways displayed at the moments in life when they were listening to God and not going to war or going to war, Asa, we are told, is an excellent king. Vayasarat mizbechot hanechar v'abamot vayishaber hamatzevot vayigada et ha'asherim. He abolished the alien altars and shrines. He smashed the pillars. He cut down the posts. Vayomer liyuda lidrosh et Adonai Elohei avotehem v'lasot haTorah mitzvot. And he ordered the Yehuda to turn to God and observe the teachings and the commandments. Vayasar mikol arei Yehuda et habamot ve'et hachamanim v'tishkot hamamlacha lefanav. He abolished the shrines, the incense, the stands throughout the cities of Yehuda, and the kingdom was untroubled under him. And so this is not surprise, classical. It says that because Asa listened to God, therefore there was peace in the land. That is generally the way that we like to think about things here in our Tanakh, and therefore Asa is listening to God, and therefore there is not war. It's not like Shishak. It's not like the past generations. And here we continue in verse 3. Vayomer liYehuda lidrosh et Adonai Elohei avotehem lasot haTorah v'hamitzvah. And he told the people, sorry, I read that verse already, he told the people to listen. I guess I didn't pay attention at first, that the word lidrosh, we had this word the other day, that Rechavam, it said, didn't be doresh of God. He didn't seek out God. But here we're told that Asa did. So let's continue with verse 5. He built fortified towns in Yehuda since the land was untroubled. He was not engaged in warfare during those years, for God had granted him rest. But there was no worries. Everything was fine. He could go and he could do projects on behalf of the kingdom, and because he didn't have to worry about being invaded. We said that's what he said. He said to the people of Judah, let's build up the cities, surround them with walls, with towers, with gates, bars, while the land is free. God has given us, God has turned to us, and God has allowed us to have freedom from all sides. And therefore, they were successful in their building. They didn't have to worry about going to war. And so it was a time where they could do other things. They could really build up and fortify the city and the towns in case later on that was not the case. Asa had an army of 300,000 men from Yehuda and 280,000 from Binyamin, and they were strong men. And right, interestingly, it doesn't say it here like we know about David. When David made an accounting of the army and took a census, it was seen as a sin. So either we're leaving that out, that perhaps this was not the right way to act, that this was a sin, or it's just being mentioned that how many people he had because of the way that God gave him peace, and therefore he has a very strong and successful army. So here we have somebody who goes to war against him, which is Zerach the Cushi. Cush usually Ethiopia is the way that we translate it. I was just in a lift yesterday with an Ethiopian driver who told me that Cush is the name of the people born in the south part of Ethiopia. So maybe southern Ethiopia, maybe parts of Ethiopia more in the Tanakh, considered parts of Mitzrayim, parts of Egypt. We saw a couple chapters ago, Shishak amongst the people he brings seems to be like people like Libyans and Cushim. And so he has an army, 1,300 chariots, and he reaches Maresha. Asa comes out, and the battle lines were drawn in the valley of Tzfat by Maresha. Ein imcha la'azor bein rav le'ein koach azarnu Adonai Eloheinu ki alecha nashanu v'shumcha banu al ha'amon hazeh Adonai Eloheinu ata al ya'atzor imcha enosh. He calls out to God. What does he say to God? God, help us, right? We need you to help us. It's all the same to you. Help the numerous and the powerless. Help us, God. We rely on you in your name, right? You say we have a big army, we have lots of people, but we're really powerless. It's really you who will fight the battle for us. And God routed the Cushites before Asa, before Yehuda. The Cushites fled, right? And obviously saying here that it was from God. A great victory, and the Asa and his soldiers were able to pursue them all the way as far as Gerar, and they were wounded, and there so many of them were wounded and killed that they could not come back to fight again, and they were broken before God. And the Jews gained much wealth, etc. in this. And all the cities in the vicinity of Gerar were ravaged, for a terror of God seized them, and all the cities were plundered, and much loot was taken. They also ravaged the encampment of herdsmen. They captured sheep and camels, and they returned back to Jerusalem from there. So here we read about the story of Asa, and really we have just a description of one part of Asa's life, and it's obviously a very good description of the life of Asa, which is not a surprise in this book. And he's also a religious, quite a devout and religious king. And let's get to what we have talked about a number of times here, which is this question of the distinctions between the different chapters. So we have here key differences here is that we have, well, let's talk about the Ethiopian invasion. The Ethiopian invasion is really not mentioned at all in the book of Melachim, which is a surprise. Here it is the big event, and here it's the centerpiece of Asa's early reign. There, of course, much more political, much more reform details. And here it's just basically describing religious revival, and it's also describing belief in God. Asa, we know, is a great king, but in Chronicles and here in Divrei Hyamim, it's much more about the dependence of God in prayer, Asa's reforms, and God's blessing him with peace. We the previous year with Asa's father, previous king, who was not seen as a great king, a great religious leader. However, when he went to war, he was relying upon God. And so, like many of the chapters in this book here, Melachim, more political, right? And here it's much more religious, much more, he's able to defeat things, and it's all because of their devotion to God. So it continues in the ways that we've seen before in terms of really trying to present the kings of Yehuda less in their political light. We have some of that's mentioned, and much more in their religious light and their devotion to God and closeness to the temple of God. As again, we've said many times, say it again, this is all because we're in the second Beit HaMikdash, and we have to really prop up those people and let them know you are part of a great history. And this is what happened when the Jews listened to God, when they brought sacrifices, when they showed their allegiance to the temple. As long as we continue to do that, then we too will be successful.